Okay, I wanted to go over the Unjust Steward, and not just with like there's Luke 16, of course. If you're not familiar with the Unjust Steward, this is gonna be this first part is gonna be like a little bit of a refresher, but um, you see in the Unjust Steward that it doesn't really say like, oh, like what happens or like they're like it's just a parable, and you see like, oh yeah, like they're wiser than the children of light. Well, you see in Genesis that you're given two examples of like two different, basically unjust stewards. Like they wasted their goods, and you see the outcomes for both of them. But and I'll get into that. But so first, just refreshing Luke 16. And he said also unto his disciples, there was a certain rich man which had a steward, and the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods. And he called him, and said unto him, how is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. Then the steward said within himself, what shall I do? For my Lord taketh away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig, to beg I am ashamed. I am resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So he called every one of his Lord's debtors unto him, and said unto the first, how much owest thou unto my Lord? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said unto him, take thy bill, and sit down quickly, and write 50. Because what is even like? Because this is describing like the the house of Israel. Like how much do they owe? Right? They weren't doing all the trying to do all the sacrificial law and all that stuff, but they need to quickly keep the covenants of promise, the 10 Commandments, and eating clean. Then said he to another, and how much owest thou? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said unto him, take thy bill, and write fourscore. I believe that's, let's see, fourscore is 80. So he had to write a bigger portion, and that's because Judah and even like the people that are doing the feast, they're like putting all these other like they they need to like take off the doing the feast and stuff, and sure they're like maybe like keeping the 10 Commandments and stuff, but like not doing the sacrificial law and things like that. Um, and the Lord commended the unjust steward, because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. Um, and I think I'll stop there. But basically, the unjust steward, he wasted his goods. The goods is the people, where he was putting this yoke upon the people. Because it could be either side. So like if you're an apostate Christian, like if you're like a apostate like pastor, then you're like basically saying like no, don't keep any of the commandments. So you have to like write a check for half. Um, Tell the congregation keep the 10 Commandments, eat clean. But then there's also the other side, right? They're putting too much on the people. They're telling them like, yeah, keep the 10 Commandments, eat clean, but then also do like all these other like handwritten ordinances by Moses um, and like whatever else they might have, do the feast, whatever. But you're supposed to just write 80 um, for these people, to because not putting stumbling blocks and not making it like God made it super easy for people to repent today, um, to just keep the covenants of promise, right? Ephesians 2:12, and then you're grafted into the Commonwealth of Israel, because there's more instructions like with the feast. You can only do them in the land, um, and Yeshua ended sacrificial law. Um, but yeah, so now I wanted to go to the the main point. So Genesis 40. So this is when Joseph is in Egypt, um, and he's in prison. But so Genesis 40, starting in verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. Right? They were unjust with their stewardship. Um, and so they were cast into prison. Um, and he put them inward in the house of the captain of the guard into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. Um, and like another thing too, like Egypt, like spiritual Egypt, represents America, right? There's spiritual Sodom, spiritual Egypt, and I'm pretty sure spiritual Sodom is like kind of with Jerusalem, um, and spiritual Egypt is with America. Um, so with Babylon. And so, verse 4, and the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a season inward. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning, and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him, and the ward of his Lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. So what are these ripe grapes? Let's look in Isaiah chapter 5. So, Isaiah 5. Saul started, I guess I'll just start at 1. Now will I sing to my well-beloved a song of my beloved touching his vineyard. My well-beloved hath a vineyard in a very fruitful hill, and he fenced it, and gathered out the stones thereof, and planted it with the choicest vine, and built a tower in the midst of it, and also made a winepress therein, and he looked that it should bring forth grapes, right? Grapes, ripe grapes. And it brought forth wild grapes. Wild grapes is like poison grapes, so it's not good. Um, and now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, I pray you, between me and my vineyard. What could have been done more to my vineyard that I have not done in it? Wherefore, when I looked that it should bring forth grapes, brought it forth wild grapes. And now go, I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away the hedge thereof, and it shall be eaten up, and break down the wall thereof, and it shall be trodden down. And I will lay it waste. It shall not be pruned nor digged, but there shall come up briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his pleasant plant. So now in the next we're seeing what's the difference between ripe grapes and and wild grapes, poison grapes. And he looked for judgment, ripe grapes, but behold, oppression, wild grapes. For righteousness, ripe grapes, but behold, a cry. So the ripe grapes is judgment and righteousness. Those are even the two elevated commandments, right? Loving God, like God's righteousness, keeping that, and then love your neighbor, judging righteous judgment. So back in Genesis 40, so I'll just start again at verse 9. And the chief butler told him his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. 3 branches are 3 days. So what is this 3 days all about? Well, Peter talks about this very thing. So, 2 Peter 3, we'll start there. So, 2 Peter 3, verse 8, but beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. So it's talking about 3,000 years. And you see, and so more specifically, going to Hosea 6, where Peter is even pointing to, so Hosea 6, verse 1, come and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. After 2 days, after 2,000 years, right, Yeshua was resurrected and went into heaven. And so after 2,000 years of him being in heaven, then after 2 days will he revive us. And the 3rd day he'll raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Then shall we know if we follow on to know the Lord. His going forth is prepared as the morning, and he shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter and former rain unto the earth. So, after 2,000 years is, you even see the great and terrible day of the Lord, right? That's the Great Tribulation, 3.5 years. And then there's the millennium reign. So the 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head, and restore thee unto thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner when thou wast his butler. So he was an unjust steward, but he repented, he did judgments and righteousness, and he regained his stewardship. But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing, that they should put me into the dungeon. So this, with the chief of the butlers or whatever, he was essentially like one of the like repented unjust stewards, right? Wiser than the children of light. And what it looks like is that he would have received the first fruits calling. But so now you get into the other example, which is the chief baker. So when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there was of all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds to eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, This is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days, right? Same thing. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh. So, what is that even talking about? Well, this is talking about the like great the dark and terrible day of the Lord. Um, so hopping over to Jeremiah 7, I think, yeah, Jeremiah 7. So I'll start at verse 27. Therefore thou shalt speak all these words unto them, but they will not hearken to thee. Thou shalt also call unto them, but they will not answer thee. But thou shalt say unto them, This is a nation that obeyeth not the voice of the Lord their God, nor receiveth correction. Truth is perished, and is cut off from their mouth. Cut off thine hair, O Jerusalem, and cast it away, and take up a lamentation on high places. For the Lord hath rejected and forsaken the generation of his wrath. For the children of Judah have done evil in my sight, saith the Lord. They have set their abominations in the house, which is called by my name, to pollute it. And they have built the high places of Tophet, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters to the fire, which I commanded them not, neither came it into my heart. Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that it shall no more be called Tophet, nor the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. For they shall bury in Tophet till there be no place. And the carcasses of this people shall be meat for the fowls of the heaven. Right? The same thing. And for the beasts of the earth, and none shall fray them. Then will I cause to cease from the cities of Judah and from the streets of Jerusalem the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, for the land shall be desolate. Right? This is talking about the sixth seal. And that's the very thing that Genesis 40 is talking about. Right, I'll reread the verse. Verse 19. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree. Right? Going to die. Like even Ephraim, like when he offended in Baal, he died. And the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. And it came to pass, the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants. So this is the wedding feast, right? You have the 5 wise virgins and the 5 foolish virgins. Well, the 5 wise virgins were able to go into, like, because they would have been like the chief butler, right? The unjust steward that gets the first fruits calling, they get into the wedding. But then the 5 foolish, they didn't, like, they weren't, like, preparing their, like, oil or whatever, like, in the lamp, and so they didn't make it, and so they go through tribulation. And, yeah, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the chief baker among his servants, and he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, right? Restoring his stewardship. And he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. So, yeah, like, hopefully this kind of, like, elaborates on showing, like, 2 different examples of what happens if you're the unjust steward that repents, or if you don't repent. Because it's even interesting because, right, the chief baker, baking, feasting, stuff like that, it can remind you of Ephraim and Hosea, doing the sacrifices, doing the feasts and stuff. And they go into great tribulation for that very reason, because they're not executing judgment. So what do you have to do to be the unjust steward? You have to quickly write a check for half. Um, just tell people to keep the covenants of promise, right? Keep the Ten Commandments, to eat clean, because that's the righteousness, and then you're supposed to execute judgment, because like that's the right fruit. Um, Execute judgment between a man and his neighbor, by rebuking sin, and not suffering the consequences of sin, right? Leviticus 19:15 to 18. Um, but yeah, praise Yah.